subscribe, like, comment. Because once you step inside this story, there's no turning back, and the truth buried here has a way of following you home. The body was found just before dawn, floating near the shadow of the bridge, where the East River turns dark and restless. A corrections officer spotted it first, face down in the freezing water, uniform still on, boots still tied. At first glance, it looked like another tragic accident connected to the most notorious jail in America. But when detectives pulled the body onto the pier, they noticed something that made the air go quiet. The man's hands were zip-tied behind his back. His name was Daniel Mercer, 37 years old, a veteran officer assigned to Rikers Island. And someone, somewhere, wanted him silenced. Within hours, the story leaked. News vans lined the waterfront. Helicopters circled overhead. Inside the jail complex, cell doors slammed harder than usual. Inmates whispered. Officers avoided eye contact. Everyone felt it. That familiar pressure, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Detective Lena Morales arrived just after sunrise. She'd worked murders across all 5 boroughs, but Rikers was different. It wasn't just a jail. It was a city within a city, a maze of locked doors, power struggles, and secrets stacked on top of secrets. Morales stared at the river, then at the looming buildings across the water, already knowing this case would fight back. Mercer wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the river that night. His shift ended at midnight. According to the logs, he clocked out on time. According to his supervisor, he never missed roll call, never cut corners, never caused trouble. But Morales had learned long ago that trouble didn't always announce itself. Sometimes it hid behind routine. Inside Mercer's locker, investigators found his badge, his keys, and a folded piece of paper tucked inside his boot. No words, just a date written in black ink. 3 days from now. That was when the case stopped looking like an accident and started looking like a warning. As Morales dug deeper, she learned Mercer had recently been reassigned to a housing unit known for violence and understaffing. Inmates there rotated constantly. Men waiting months, sometimes years, without trial. Tensions ran high. Fights broke out over nothing. Guards learned to look away to survive. Mercer hadn't looked away. He'd filed complaints. Too many. About missing cameras. About overtime logs being altered. About medical calls going unanswered. People who speak up inside Rikers don't last long. Morales interviewed officers who worked Mercer's last shift. Their stories didn't line up. One claimed Mercer left early. Another said he stayed behind to finish paperwork. A third insisted Mercer was called back inside after clocking out. No one could explain why the security cameras covering the staff exit went dark for exactly 22 minutes that night. Then there were the inmates. One name kept surfacing in hushed tones. Marcus Bell, 26, held without bail on a weapons charge. Bell was supposed to be in his cell all night, but a head count discrepancy placed him in a common area around the same time Mercer vanished. When questioned, Bell stared at the table and smiled. "You're asking the wrong questions," he said. "You should be asking who wanted him gone." That afternoon, Morales met with an internal affairs investigator who'd been tracking corruption complaints tied to Rikers for over a year. Files disappeared. Witnesses recanted. One whistleblower transferred out of state without explanation. Mercer's name appeared again and again in the margins of those reports, like a ghost trying to leave fingerprints. The pressure escalated fast. City officials demanded answers. Protesters gathered outside the gates, chanting about abuse, neglect, and death behind bars. Rumors spread that Rikers was finally going to be shut down, not because of policy, but because the truth was too dangerous to keep buried. That night, Morales returned to the jail, walking corridors that smelled of bleach and rust. Somewhere behind those walls, Mercer had uncovered something powerful enough to kill him, and someone powerful enough to make it look routine. She was about to leave when her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. No text, just a photo. It showed a locked maintenance basement beneath one of the oldest housing units. A place not listed on any official map. Spray painted on the door, barely visible under layers of grime, were 2 words, "Check here." But when Morales arrived with a warrant and forced the door open, what they found inside didn't just explain Daniel Mercer's death. It threatened to expose why Rikers Island was being shut down and why some people would do anything to stop that. All hit first: stale water, oil, and something metallic that lingered in the back of your throat. The maintenance basement hadn't been opened in years, maybe even longer. Dust coated every pipe like ash after a forest fire. Flashlights cut thin tunnels through the oppressive dark as Detective Morales and her team stepped inside, their boots splashing through shallow puddles that reflected the ceiling in broken, distorted fragments. What they discovered wasn't a body. It was so much worse. Metal filing cabinets lined the walls, their drawers bent and dented, as if someone had tried, and failed, to destroy them in a furious hurry. Inside were folders stamped with dates, inmate numbers, and cryptic internal codes Morales had never seen before. There were grainy surveillance stills printed on cheap paper, medical reports with no signatures, and incident logs all marked resolved. Even though the injuries shown in the attached photos were anything but. This wasn't just neglect. This was a system. Morales realized Officer Mercer hadn't been filing random complaints about jail conditions. He'd stumbled onto a shadow operation, a whole network of unofficial housing transfers, disciplinary blackouts, where inmates would just disappear from the system for days, sometimes even weeks. No lawyers, no phone calls, no records at all. These men were being moved into dead zones of the jail, sections where cameras were conveniently disabled and all accountability went to die. Morales felt the chilling weight of it all press into her chest. This basement wasn't just hidden, it was actively protected. Before the team could even begin to catalog everything, a radio crackled to life. An officer's voice came through, sharp and panicked. "We've got a situation in Housing 4. Inmate assault. Possible hostage." Instantly, everything snapped into motion. Housing 4 was pure chaos when they arrived. Alarms wailed. Officers shouted orders that no one was following. In the center of the unit, one inmate lay bleeding on the floor while another knelt over him, gripping a broken mop handle like a weapon. But Morales' attention locked onto the third man in the cell block, Marcus Bell. He stood perfectly still, his hands raised, his eyes locked on Morales as if he had been waiting specifically for her. Bell was pulled out and cuffed before anyone could ask questions. In the interview room, he leaned back in his chair, completely unfazed by the blood still staining his sleeves. "You found it," he said, his voice eerily calm. Morales didn't answer, letting the silence hang in the air. "They don't like when people find it," Bell continued, a knowing look in his eyes. Mercer didn't either. He thought if he did things the right way, someone would actually listen. "Did you kill him?" Morales asked, cutting straight to the point. Bell let out a short, sharp laugh. "No, but I watched him die." Bell then described a meeting Mercer had been ordered to attend after his shift. A supervisor he trusted told him there was some kind of paperwork issue down in maintenance. Bell himself had been pulled from his cell that very same night, told to clean a corridor he'd never seen before. That was when he saw Mercer arguing with two men in plain clothes near the service exit. "They weren't COs," Bell said, his voice dropping. "No badges, no names, just authority." Bell claimed that Mercer realized, far too late, that his complaints hadn't just gone unnoticed, they'd been redirected, studied, used to decide exactly what kind of problem he was. Bell said Mercer fought back when they tried to restrain him. That's when someone zip-tied his hands. After that, Bell said quietly, his gaze distant, he stopped struggling. The story should have ended right there. But instead, it fractured into a dozen more questions. Security footage from the riverfront showed Mercer was already unconscious when he was placed near the water's edge. Someone adjusted his uniform. Someone made sure his badge was left behind. Someone wanted his death to look clean, like a tragic but simple case. And then, the footage glitched. 22 minutes. Just gone. An entire block of time erased from the record. As Morales started pushing for warrants, she felt resistance mounting from every direction. Evidence requests stalled without explanation. Files she had already reviewed mysteriously vanished from the system overnight. Internal Affairs suddenly stopped returning her calls, their lines going straight to voicemail. Then, just after midnight, Morales received a call from the medical examiner. Mercer's autopsy had revealed something new, something shocking. He hadn't drowned. He'd been injected with a powerful paralytic agent long before his body was dumped in the river. The water was just staging. A distraction. The real crime, the murder, had happened somewhere else entirely. The implications were staggering. This wasn't a single rogue officer or a violent inmate lashing out. This was coordination, meticulous planning. It required resources far beyond what any one person could have. That same night, another call came in. An inmate who was connected to Mercer's original complaints was found unresponsive in his cell. The official cause of death was ruled as suicide, but the ligature marks on his neck didn't match the sheet that was supposedly used. And, of course, the cameras outside his cell had malfunctioned for precisely 8 minutes right around the time of death. Morales stood in the hallway of the precinct, the overhead lights flickering erratically, and realized the chilling truth. She was getting closer to an answer, but the people who needed that answer buried were closing in on her, too. Mercer had tried to expose the corrupt machine from the inside. Now, that same machine knew her name. As Morales walked back toward the exit, her phone buzzed again. It was the same unknown number as before. This time, a single, terrifying sentence appeared on the screen. "Stop digging, or you're next." She looked back at the endless rows of locked doors and cold steel, understanding something with chilling certainty. Rikers wasn't just falling apart from neglect. It was actively fighting to survive, and it would destroy anyone who got in its way. Thank you so much for watching. If you're fascinated by these deep dives into complex crime stories, when the sun rose, Detective Lena Morales realized the Daniel Mercer case was about something much bigger. It was about control, who had it, who abused it, and the lengths they'd go to keep it. The threat she'd received wasn't a bluff. Within hours, she was pulled off the case. They said it was for her own safety. Her badge access was cut, her reports flagged. Someone high up had decided she was getting too close to the fire. But Morales knew that the most dangerous part of any investigation is when the truth is just about to break through the surface. She didn't go home. Instead, she drove to a quiet precinct in Queens. She was looking for Peter Vaughn, a former internal affairs analyst who now worked nights filing cold cases. Vaughn hadn't just resigned because of stress. He'd been forced out after he started asking questions about data problems at Rikers. When Morales showed him everything she had, the hidden files, Mercer's murder, the wiped security footage, Vaughn didn't even flinch. "Containment," he said flatly. "It's not just for inmates. It's for information. It's for people." Vaughn pulled out a secure drive he'd kept hidden since he was pushed out of the department. On it were mirrored copies of logs Morales thought were gone forever. Transfer orders that were digitally signed but never actually authorized. Medical forms approved at impossible speeds. And one single authorization code that appeared over and over, tied to a private contractor hired to modernize security. This contractor had access to everything: cameras, databases, even maintenance tunnels. And they answered to no one. Working together, they traced the paralytic agent used on Mercer. It came from a supplier that only sold to licensed medical facilities and correctional contractors. The paperwork showed shipments had been received at Rikers, but they were hidden under fake inventory labels. Someone hadn't just bent the rules. They had weaponized the entire system, turning tools meant to protect people into weapons. That's when Morales understood. Daniel Mercer's last act wasn't just filing complaints. It was copying files. The date he'd scrawled in his locker wasn't a deadline. It was a scheduled data transfer, set for 3 days after his death. With Vaughn's help, Morales found the remote server Mercer had set up, cleverly disguised as an old maintenance archive. At precisely 9 p.m. that night, the files went live. Mercer's final message was sent out anonymously to journalists, civil rights lawyers, and federal oversight committees. The fallout was instant and explosive. The next morning, headlines screamed across the city. Secret holding cells. Unrecorded uses of force. Inmates who had simply vanished. Whistleblowers who had been silenced. This wasn't just a scandal anymore. It was a total system collapse. City officials scrambled to do damage control. A few arrests were made, some mid-level supervisors, a contractor executive, a couple of medical staff. Just enough names to make it look like they were taking action, but not enough to explain how deep the rot really went. The protests started again, this time bigger and louder. Families gathered at the gates of Rikers, holding pictures of loved ones who had disappeared into that black hole. Former officers started coming forward, finally confirming the dark rumors that had circulated for years. Rikers Island wasn't just broken, it was designed this way. As federal investigators finally swarmed the island, Morales felt a moment of relief. Weeks later, the city announced that Rikers would be closed. They called it reform, progress. They promised new facilities, new oversight, a new beginning. But Morales knew there were no clean endings in a story like this. Marcus Bell, the inmate who had tried to help her, was transferred before he could ever testify. His destination was listed as confidential. 2 months later, his name showed up in an obituary column in another state, spelled slightly differently. The cause of death was listed as unknown. Peter Vaughn vanished that same week. His apartment was cleared out. No forwarding address. He didn't even leave a resignation letter this time. And Daniel Mercer? Officially, his death was ruled a homicide by unknown persons. Case closed. His family got a settlement from the city and a letter praising his service, with no mention of what he had truly sacrificed. Late one night, long after the media had moved on to the next big story, Morales found herself back at the river where Mercer's body had been found. The water flowed on, just as it always had, cold and indifferent, carrying its secrets downstream. Her phone buzzed. A single message from an unknown number. You closed the building, not the system. Morales stared at the screen for a long moment before putting the phone back in her pocket. She finally understood. Rikers wasn't being shut down because justice had won. It was being shut down because it had been exposed. And exposure was the one thing a machine like that couldn't survive. Somewhere else, in another facility, under a new name, the same cycle was probably already starting. New hallways, new blind spots, new men being told to stay quiet if they wanted to see another day. The doors would still lock. The cameras would still mysteriously go dark. And the river would just keep moving, carrying the weight of everything we choose not to see. This story might be over, but the fight is far from it. If this chilled you to the bone, stick around. The next chapter is just getting started. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to follow for more.